Hello, and welcome to the Chemical Breakdown, where we quiz contestants on toxic chemicals. This episode, we will focus on Lindane, and we welcome Moaid to the stage. Today, we're going to focus on a few categories, which are use, structure, environment, exposure, and loss. So which category would you like to start with first?
Give me use first.
Use? All right. What has Lindane been used for in the past and more recently?
So according to my research, actually, I think Lindane has been used as two different aspects. And first, it's been used as a topical skin lotion and shampoo. So basically, the Lindane topical shampoo, it kills the parasites that live or lay eggs in the hair, and this helps treat head and pubic lice. And Lindane is also available in a topical lotion that helps treat scabies on the skin. And other than used on humans, it's also used as a insecticide for both agriculture and non-agricultural purposes, and has been used in seed treatment, soil treatment, foliar applications, and used in forest, timber, store materials, and just helping eliminate parasites on animals.
Okay, good job. That's 10 points. That's perfectly right. Which category would you like to go into next? The remaining ones are structure, environment, exposure, and laws.
I think I will go with laws.
Laws? All right. So which regulations or laws has been put in place to control the use or application of Lindane?
So Lindane actually has a couple of different laws, and it's different in the U.S. and another big place is the U.K., where Lindane has been banned. First, in the U.S. has been heavily restricted, so the keyword is heavily restricted, and it's not been banned since 1983 from the EPA. And then in 2002, just recently, California banned the pharmaceutical use of Lindane because of the concerns of water quality. Though this is only for the pharmaceutical use, so they still can use it as insecticide, just not as a shampoo and a lotion. And then in the UK, in 1999 specifically, July 7th, 1999, if I'm correct, Lindane was banned in the UK. But other than that, it's just the FDA has been carefully monitoring Lindane, but there isn't really anything heavily restricted right now. It's just being monitored and seen, and for people to be cautious about this.
All right, good job. Another 10 points. Which category would you like to go to next?
Can I get structure, please?
Structure, yeah. So the first question in structure, there's two questions actually. Which one would you like first? The first one is, do you know what the general chemical structure is? The next one is, which class of toxin does Lindane fall into?
I'll go with the easier one, the chemical structure.
Chemical structure? Okay. What is Lindane's general chemical structure?
The chemical structure of Lindane is C6H6 Cl6. Is that right?
That is right.
Okay.
And I will share my screen up here. This is the general chemical structure, if you can see it. Okay, 5 points. Next question, structure. What class of toxin does Lindane fall into?
Class of toxin. Can I get a second for this? Let me think.
Yeah, take your time.
Class of toxin. I actually do not know.
Hold on. I think there's some internet difficulties right now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Here. So the correct answer is that it falls into persistent organic pollutant, and it falls into the EPA toxicity class 2. That is the correct answer. So that's 5 points for the first question. Unfortunately, you got the next one wrong. Which category would you like next?
I will go with, let me see which one is easier. I think it's environment and exposure are left.
Environment and exposure are left, yes.
I'll go with exposure.
Exposure? Okay. Exposure first. Which question would you like first? What are the symptoms of exposure? What is the approximate toxic and lethal dose and the toxicity of the contaminant under conditions? The third one is, which life stages are more sensitive than others, if there are any? And the last question is, which effect are the effects of Lindane more synergistic or antagonistic with those of other environmental contaminants?
I'll go with the antagonistic and synergistic. I'll go with the last one.
Okay, last question first. What is your answer for this?
So based on my findings, I think the effects of Lindane are antagonistic with other environmental contaminants and not synergistic. And Lindane happens to be more soluble than other contaminants and does not work well with other environmental contaminants. So it should not be synergistic and will be antagonistic.
That is true. It is antagonistic with other environmental contaminants. Another 5 points. Like next.
Who affects more? Because that's the next easiest question.
Which one do you want?
What group of people Lindane affects?
Sure. That question you can have.
Okay. Can I answer right now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So as we know from before, Lindane is a shampoo and a lotion. So I would say Lindane strongly affects people with sensitive skin, and since it also is an insecticide and it can be brought into the air, it especially affects people in older life stages with weak nervous systems, and they're more likely to get a central nervous system disorder.
Good, good. Another 5 points. There's 2 questions left in exposure. Which one you want to answer first?
I'll go with the symptoms.
Symptoms? Okay. What are the specific symptoms of exposure to Lindane?
I think if I remember correct, it should be irritation and breathing in the nose, lungs, and throat, and it's also dangerous to the kidneys and livers. And then some rather smaller symptoms would be just irregular headaches, vomiting, and nausea.
That is true. Those are the specific symptoms. Another 5 points. And you're left with the final question under exposure.
I don't quite remember. I remember from my research that they had an oral and a dermal LD50 done on rats, but I quite do not remember that number, and I did not research lethal dose, so I don't remember any of this part. Sorry.
Perfectly fine. The correct answer is that the average lethal dose of Lindane in humans is 125 milligrams per kg, and Lindane is classified as moderately acutely toxic. And you were correct about the rats testing. It has an oral LD50 of 88 milligrams per kg and a dermal LD50 of 1,000 milligrams per kg.
Okay, thank you. I'll write that down so I can remember it for next time.
Sure. Okay, so you're left with, I believe, just environment now.
Okay, yeah, I'll go with environment then.
Do you see the list of questions?
Yeah, there. I think it's how many questions? 7.
There's 7 questions in environment. Which one
Okay.
would you like to go with first?
You can pick for this one. I don't know these. I
Okay.
think I'm good for environment.
Let's go with question D. How long does it remain active in the environment?
Well, the half-life for Lindane is about 120 days, but it can last for much longer because remember, this is just a half-life, and even though the half-life is about 120 days, it can even last for more than a year. And I think one of the biggest removal tactics is through volatilization and just not using the chemical, trying to get whatever is already in the environment out through the air and up into the atmosphere.
That is right. 3 points for that question. 6 more questions left under environment. Which one would you like to go with?
I'll go with part E because it kind of resembles part D.
Part E? Okay. So is the contaminant Lindane volatile and prone to moving into the air from soil or water?
So as I said before, how we can remove Lindane from the environment is through volatilization. So we already know that Lindane is volatile in the air and insoluble in water, and Lindane is expected to move slowly through soil. So that's a good thing. So it will take longer to affect organisms in the soil, but it will take a larger effect on us because we are breathing in the air that Lindane may have contaminated the environment. So Lindane can volatilize from soil into the air and back, and also into water sources. So it's important that we keep Lindane in the least prone and least suspectable sources.
That is perfectly right. Another 3 points. And at this time, we will be taking a commercial break, so we'll get back with you right away.
Okay.
Our first commercial break is sponsored by Environmental Faith, toxic chemicals including Lindane. So what we don't want to use is Lindane in shampoo bottles, as we've already talked about during our game show. It's toxic both in water bodies and to aquatic organisms, especially also to humans, but we have a good amount of substitutes for Lindane. Some of these substitutes include piperonal butoxide, permethrin, and malathion, as these are all approved treatments for head lice instead of Lindane, obviously. However, there's also non-chemical substitutes that we would like to offer. These ones are lice combs, which we do offer here, and lice combs are very effective as they're obviously non-chemical, and obviously they do not have bad effects on your body and the environment. And with that message, we will be returning back to our game show. So we're still left with environment, and there's a few questions left. Which question would you like to go with next?
I will go with the last one.
Okay. Which habitats or species are most affected by Lindane? And if so, if there are any, how does it display that effect?
So I know Lindane is accumulated in colder climates. I remember the game show talked something about Alaska. Is that right?
On the right track.
I don't remember the animals they had researched, but I do remember that Lindane affects colder climates, Alaska, and also large bodies of water, as well as obviously the moist soil and the wetland habitat areas. I just needed a quick relapse of what animals they were researched on in Alaska.
Yeah. So I'll give you 2 points for the rest of the parts. And the animals, you were on the right track with Alaska. The residues of Lindane have been found in animals of walruses, seals, and whales.
Okay.
That was the correct answer, but you can get 2 points for answering the rest.
Yeah.
Cross that out. You're left with a few more questions. Do you have a preference over which question you want?
I think I can just go blind. I can go with anything.
Okay, we'll give you the first one. How was linen introduced into our environment?
So actually, Lindane is first introduced into the soil. As we know, it's volatile. So it's first strongly absorbed in soils with high organic content, so the wetland habitat areas. But the way that we get it, especially in humans, is through oral digestion of food containing the chemical, because as we know, lindane has been used as an insecticide. So some of the food that we eat comes from the plants that have been affected by lindane. And obviously, from the soil, lindane can be released in the air and into our bodies.
Good. That is right. And that's another 3 points for you. You're left with, I believe, three more questions. Would you want me to give you one of the questions?
Yeah, I think we can just go in order from now.
Okay, let's go with B then. What is the risk associated with lindane specifically in the U.S. environment?
So as we already know, lindane affects our skin, our nervous system, our hair, but more in the environmental aspect is that it's bad for animals and fish, especially because lindane can be in the environment for long periods of times. And in particular, it can contaminate the tissues of animals. And it's basically bad for every organism that's living in a river, in a lake, in moist soil or wetland habitat areas. And just a quick important aspect is that each treatment that we use for our head, for lice, for lindane, it can pollute almost 6 million gallons of water. So imagine if every person in this world had one treatment, how many gallons are being affected? That's basically showing a broader aspect of how lindane is contaminating and ruining our natural habitat.
Seems like you really did your research with that question.
Yeah.
Here, this is a diagram I'd like to show you too. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so this basically goes off based off your answer. It shows the toxic concentrations of lindane in these specific aquatic organisms with this specific milligram per liter. And as we already know, lindane affects aquatic organisms the worst, and this basically just shows the concentrations.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Yeah. So going forward, question C. For lindane, does it pose a present or future threat to the safety of our environment? And if so, why?
So I think it's both a present and a long term. As we already talked about previously, it contaminates large bodies of water and can persist for a long time. So when it's persisting for a long time, that also brings in the long term effects. And as we already also discussed, lindane can accumulate into soil, and this causes lindane to continuously bioaccumulate into the food chain of fatty tissue of organisms. So this bioaccumulation basically is a long-term, low-level problem that's going to hinder the entire process in the natural food chain.
Very good. Another 3 points. And finally, that leaves us with our final question for the day. How is lindane broken down?
So as we know, lindane first comes from moist soil and then is gradually volatilized into the air. And it's specifically done through a reaction with hydroxyl radicals. And they're basically just neutral forms of hydroxide ions. And these neutral forms of the hydroxide ions basically they clump and they break down continuously basically into lindane. And this also binds very strongly to dust particles and sediment, which basically is another explanation of why lindane is bioaccumulating in our food chain because of the organisms that live in the water, in the soil, in the wetland habitat areas, and also ourselves because we are breathing the same air as those organisms.
That was our final question. Seems like you really know your stuff on lindane.
Hmm.
And that was the chemical breakdown, the quiz show where we quiz contestants on toxic chemicals. So I guess you could say we're done with the game show.
I love being on the game show.
Thank you. And we'll see you again next time where we'll quiz you on dogs.